Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining the second webinar in our Ask a Sage Expert series, the Optimization Odyssey, Navigating the Depths of Efficiency. My name is Ali Pakalnis, and I will help facilitate our webinar. Before we get started, here are a few tips on using the Zoom platform so you can engage with our presenters and have the best experience possible. We encourage you to ask questions throughout the presentation. Please feel free to unmute yourself and ask questions live, or if you prefer, you can use the Ask a Question feature to type them in. If you need any assistance, click on the Raise Your Hand button and I will connect with you to help. Within 72 hours of the webinar, you will receive a link to download the slide deck and recorded presentation. And with that, I'd like to introduce you to our presenters, Jeremy Anderson and Sean DeMuro.
Hi, Jeremy Anderson. I'm a manager on the Managed Services Intacct team. I come from a nonprofit background with end user experience, so I'm excited to share some ways to be efficient in your Intacct environment.
And I'm Sean DeMiro. I'm a senior consultant on the Managed Services Intacct team as well. I got my beginnings in the wealth management space as an end user of Intacct before getting some nonprofit and beyond experience in my time as a consultant. Excited to be here with you.
So the quest objectives for today is we're going to show you how we can find if and when there are variances between your AP subledger and your general ledger. We'll then talk through how to build a custom AP report you can then utilize for this reconciliation ongoing. And then we'll talk through some best practices for some AP configuration and control. So to get started, let's talk through how we can find those variances. So some considerations as we're reviewing is whether or not using multiple AP accounts. One thing to note about multiple AP accounts is that when running a general ledger or AP aging report, they will show up within a summary by those vendors. However, if you were to run a trial balance, you may have to include multiple AP accounts in order to reconcile to your subledger. Another key feature is that advances will also show up on your aging. Now, natively, they'll show up, but they may or may not show up in accounts payable. A lot of people will utilize something like accounts payable advances or a prepaid account. So just something to be aware when utilizing advances. Another thing is integration posting. So if you have like a bill.com posting then to your subledger, just be aware of everything that's going in and out so that you can be mindful when we're reconciling. Another part is credit card transactions. So some of you may know that credit card transactions will show up on an aging report when they're not paid. Now, these will then show up on the GL in their respective credit card liability accounts. So same thing with like the advances, or if you have multiple AP accounts, just be aware when pulling the totals for your general ledger versus your AP aging. So what I have here is a couple examples of how we can check if our GL ties to our aging report. So I like to use the dimension balances report. For those of you who are not aware of what this is, it's essentially a trial balance, but you could take a specific account and expand it by a number of dimensions. In this case, we can see that I'm looking from inception to date for the accounts payable account, and then I'm expanding by the vendor. Now, the results I have detailed on the right. What this is we can see this is an ending balance ending at 12/31/24. So we can see their total is 476 and some change. The next page I want to show you is the aging example. So typically when we run an aging report, we want to run it for the GL posting detail. In this case, I'm running it in summary. And we can see that as of 12/31, if we were to quickly glance through, our totals do in fact tie. Now, one thing I want to point out is the next slide. So when I run them again, I skip forward a couple of months to the end of February, and we can see that there are some differences. So what I want to point out is we now have a vendor that has 72,000 in their accounts payable account versus 69,500 in the GL. And then the totals don't tie. So there's a number of reasons that can be off, but what I want to run through is how we can then find those variances. I do want to quickly run through this in my sandbox environment, just so you kind of have an idea. So that dimension balance report that can be found in the general ledger under dimension balances. So we can easily navigate here and we can run it. So as of 2/28/25, I'm going to select my accounts payable account and location 100 for the one I'm referring to. And we can see that I'm already selecting those vendor ID and name. I do want to show subtotal. And then from there, I can select. All right. So we can see 487. And then if I were to go ahead and run the aging report. So we have the standard. So this is where I'm running the aging report in my slides. So 2/28/25 with the GL posting for location 100. And I'm selecting view. And we can see we're off by a small amount. I'll then navigate back to my slides. And now I'll pass it over to Sean. He's going to talk you through how we can then build a custom report just to increase our efficiency for ongoing subledger to GL reconciliation.
And so it does look like we have a question in the chat. I'm not sure if we wanted to hit that one. And which one ties to the GL? And so that will be the dimension balance report. Underlying detail is the general ledger detail, while the AP subledger reporting, the aging report, is coming directly from accounts payable.
Yep, good question.
All right. Thanks, Jeremy. I'll come back on camera. All right. So yeah, as Jeremy mentioned, we're going to be walking through a custom report build to help us narrow down on where this discrepancy is coming from. Our first screenshot here, is just showing our first step of the custom report wizard. If you haven't seen this before, you can find this in your reports module under the advanced reports section. If you see custom report writer, that's where we're at. If you also see interactive custom report writer, that is above and beyond what we're looking at today. Also on this screen, I've included a couple of the vendor aging records and options we have when building these reports, but we're really going to focus on just our vendor aging report object. And that's what we have selected in step 1 of our custom report build. The reason we're doing that is because it combines both the detail, the header, and the aging periods for the AP ledger. And so we can go on to the next slide. And on this next slide, we have our columns we are going to include in this report. Up at the top, we have our vendor aging report section, which shows our buckets of aging, 0, 1 to 30, and so on to 90 and beyond, 91 and beyond, sorry. With that said, you may see different buckets here depending on your aging periods. If you have multiple aging periods as well, you can see all of those. In addition to that, we've gone ahead and pulled in the actual AP account all our bills and AP activity were tied to. along with the title. And finally, we've gone ahead and pulled in our location ID from below in the location dimension, along with our vendor ID and vendor name from the vendor aging header. If you're going through this report build, it's important to include the vendor ID and vendor name from the header as opposed to the detail, mostly because any bill is going to be associated with one vendor and so on. And it's truly the sole record of that transaction. All right, we can move on to the next slide. And we get to our final column we need to add into this report, and that is our total column. As Intacct is only providing us our individual buckets, we need to create a new calculated field that just adds all of those together. As a reminder, if you have multiple aging periods, you'll want to make sure you're only including the specific ones for this report. Other than that, you'll see that you have your options to sequence this report, so you can move the columns around as needed. If this doesn't work for you, you can change it kind of anywhere you want and even change the namings of it. Finally, we just want to include our sums of those columns for each of the aging, along with our calculated column of total. All right, if we want to go to the next slide, and we should be into our grouping. So on this next couple steps is where we're actually going to make it a much more summarized report in line with what we're currently seeing on our dimension balance and aging report out of the box. The one distinction we're really making is on the vendor aging detail. We're also grouping by the AP account title. All right, if we want to go on to the next slide. And finally, once we have that report named, saved, and run, this is our result. And so I'm not sure, Jeremy, if you want to pull up Intacct and we can compare the two.
Yeah, so what I'm going to do, this is the vendor aging summary that Sean built. I'm going to go ahead and run this report. So what we want to do is we want to run it. We already found that the variance originates in February, so we're going to run this as of 2/28. I'm going to run it for location 100, and for now, I'm going to just not show details as we're reviewing. I'm going to select View, and what we can see, so the key components of this report are that everything that is tagged to the accounts payable GL account is in this section. Now we'll notice that we have this no AP account title. Now, question may be, why does that not have an AP account? Well, those type of transactions can originate from a number of activities in your environment. In this case, this one, if we were to drill into it or locate it, this one is actually from an advance. Typically, an advance would be listed as a no AP account transaction because technically, when you post an advance, it doesn't have you select an AP account. It's hitting your cash account along with either AP advances or a prepaid account. So it doesn't natively have an associated AP account. So if I were to take this balance and if I go back to my dimension balances, we can see 487.26 for account payable, and that ties to 487.26. Something else we can do is we can select customize, and we could expand this. Now that we have determined that it falls under the AP advance account, I could then expand to include. And if I select view, we will see that in total, we now tie. I do want to point out one other way you can run this dimension balances. So I'm going to select customize. I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. In this format section, I'm going to include the account ID and name. In this case, I want those to be sorted first. And then I'll just select view one more time. So now we can see at the very bottom, we have all of our all of our entries for accounts payable, and then we have a sum for 2,500 to accounts payable advances.
Jeremy, actually, one more thing, if you wouldn't mind rerunning the custom report with detail. I realized one of my columns had not saved, so I can show it a little more, another view as well.
There we go. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So go ahead.
Go ahead.
Jeremy, sorry.
Yeah. So what Sean added is the record number. So when we see this hyperlink, it allows us to then drill into that transaction. So I can select this link. And now we can see that it was from a posted advance. You may be wondering why some lines do not have a record number. That is due to there being multiple records included for that vendor. The way to solve that is we can run it in detail and then select view. And then we can see we have all of those record numbers. Good call out, Sean.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it actually leads me into kind of some possible customization in seeing the differences between summary and detail. We kind of have different fields we can include. Some might be more beneficial than other when summarized. But with that being said, actually, let's go ahead and move to this next slide. I'm going to kind of jump down to my last topic here in summary versus detail. One way you can handle that is, let's say your detail report should have a lot of the line level detail of this vendor aging. You could duplicate the original summary report, save it as a detail report with those additional fields. End of the day, one's a summary, one's a detail, or you have a detailed report that when it's summarized, you just have blank columns. Some other additional considerations I wanted to mention was just in the custom report writer, a section we did not get to was additional prompts, in that you can set up these reports to prompt the user when running for things like locations, vendors, the AP account even itself. You could set it up to exclude credit card liability accounts, much like your aging account would, or your aging report would. You can also set up prompts unrelated to these. You largely have access to anything on the record associated with the object, meaning if you have a custom object or a custom field on if you have a custom field on a vendor, you can call to that field in your reporting as well. It can be prompted on, it can be filtered on. Makes things a little bit easier with all those customizations.
Also, all good call outs there. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks, Jeremy. And last thing I did just want to mention, as we already just saw, is the drill down fields available. Select records do have the ability to drill down, but it can change by level, meaning depending on the location ID dimension you include in the report determines whether it's a drillable field or not. And actually, Jeremy, would you mind switching back to to Intacct? Apologies.
All right. Yeah. Not a problem.
And if we go back to if you don't mind just editing the custom report so that we can see the available columns to include on step 2. So to call that out more specifically, anything with these arrows is a drillable field then. So if we wanted the line detail itself, that's the record number we could include. We have the header included below, and then location ID as well as our drillable fields. Other than that, I do not believe we have a custom field on the vendor, so nothing we'd see there. But in the event that we had one, they would be outlined in a similar box, but with a red asterisk instead of the green arrow. All right, yeah, if we want to go back to the slide, that was just the last thing I wanted to call out on those different fields.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah.
All right. So we've now covered how we can find some variances. And one of the things about these reports and from the subledger to the GL is the same practice can be used for like AR, even purchasing and order entry to some degree. You might have to swap out some fields or use a different custom report, but the logic behind them is very similar in how we can use a subledger report to then compare to a GL. You might have to swap out the fields or the dimensions, but for the most part, the same method can be applied. So now I want to cover some best practices for some AP configuration and controls. So the first thing I want to do is highlight some controls that we recommend or just are some best practices. The first that we recommend is to disallow direct posting. Usually we would recommend this on your AP and your AR account, along with maybe like net assets or retained earnings. All of those GLs should usually only be posted from subledger or backend transactions. Another feature is to check the box in the AP configuration that says the payment date on a AP bill must be greater than the actual bill date. What this can prevent is what can happen is, let's say you have a bill that is posted in January, but the payment is booked in December of the prior year. What happens is the aging report will show a reduction on the aging for December. So it won't have a bill to show against that payment. So then it can cause confusion as to why we now have a reduction as opposed to a bill to apply that payment to. Another way you can add controls are with a smart rule. The one shown here is about future dates. Common thing that happens is maybe you do a typo and you say like 5/31/26 or something. So a simple smart rule can be used to prevent some of these typos or errors from taking place. Also closing books, definitely recommended after you finish posting everything in the subledger to then go ahead and close them. You don't have to wait till you're ready to close the GL to close the subledger first. And then AP approvals, even if it's a small team and maybe it's not required, but sometimes just having a second set of eyes can help prevent some of these errors from happening. I do want to move on. So what I have here is an example of that smart. And what it is basically it's saying that bill create date, so the bill date, must be less than or equal to 30 days in the future. And you'll see that this is dynamic. You could say 60 days or 90 days or 120, whatever works for your process. And you can use the same kind of logic against like the payment date and so on, or the GL posting. So you can have multiple combinations. And then what's going to happen is if the bill is outside of that parameter, I have it set to shoot a warning just to let the user know that, hey, they're posting a bill that's over 30 days in the future. And other smart rules can be added, but this is just an example. Some other considerations. So like we mentioned earlier, with accounts payable, with the overrides, we can just to be careful if we do allow. But I'll let Sean kind of take it from here and cover some of these considerations.
Yeah, and so sorry, my computer froze there for a second. Additional considerations that we haven't quite gotten to, but wanted to raise are just making sure that your user permissions are set up in a way that prevents some of these errors from happening in the first place. Making sure to always double check dates for bill payments and payment reversals. I know how many times I've seen the GL posting date versus bill date. It's always a fun one to fix, but more of we can put things in to prevent that from occurring in the first place. If you have bills sitting in confirmed, not approved, but you're still not really seeing where everything's at, make sure you're checking payment requests, because you might have a check hanging out there that has yet to be confirmed. Another easy approval option you can enable is vendor approvals. It does take some consideration prior to doing so, so not recommending turning it on immediately, but it does allow the kind of oversight of who's getting added to the system. Are we having duplicates? Are we getting records that are just causing a mess for us and confusion with the board, anything along those lines? But we can help reduce that risk just by putting a vendor approval on. Finally, we have our backdated GL posting date. Just be sure that you don't have that AP GL posting date discrepancy, because that might cause some confusions. And so if you think that might be the case, you can toggle your aging report and ledger reporting between bill date, the GL posting date, and specifically on the aging, you can select due date as well. So we can go on to the next slide. All right. And so know we're bumping up against time, so just want to wrap us up here on our objectives today. So you should feel like you've walked away knowing how to find variances between your AP subledger and general ledger, how to pull together a summarized report to help track down those discrepancies, and finally, take away some controls and processes that may help prevent these errors from occurring in the first place. And so with that, I can hand it back to Jeremy, I believe.
Yeah, we have a minute or so if anyone has any questions they'd like to bring up.
There is a question about it. Question did come through the Q&A. I can probably take this, but we'll probably need a little bit more time to answer it. Jeremy, do you know,
so
related
the
but off
question,
topic sorry, I can read it out, sorry.
yeah, go
Related
ahead.
but off topic, when making a custom report using general ledger detail as the primary data source, is there a way to add a column to get the memo at the line item level for line items produced by the report?
You can pull the memo of GL entries. Now, if you're running a general ledger report and the memo listed is a concatenation of a number of fields, it may not actually be the memo on the journal entry itself, if that's kind of what you're referring to. But technically, you can pull the values that you would see on a general ledger report.
Hey, sorry. So one of the issues we often have is that it will pull in like the header. Sorry, it'll pull in the header memo, but it won't pull in like the memo from the individual line items in the general ledger detail. But the report will list out those those items from the different journal entries, but the memo lines will be blank. And it usually, like the different memo fields in the add column section usually appears to, at least the ones that I've found, only let you pull in like the header and not the, like, I don't know the word, but the below the line item memos.
So most, not all values can be pulled into a custom report. Sometimes it's just knowing where there's multiple sections in a custom report writer. Some of them can appear to be duplicates or redundant, but usually if it's listed on the journal entry, usually we can pull that.
I'm also wondering if it's the object as well,
Yeah.
because it could be
But-
like one of those GL entries or GL batch type things, but
And we can always follow up an email if there's questions or if it doesn't quite answer what you're looking for. I know we're at time, so with that, we'll let everyone else go, but you guys have a good rest of your day. Thank you all for attending.
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.